that night at midnight, he goes, I'm going to buy your company.
Hello and welcome back to the Frog God Games YouTube channel. My name is Brianna, and today we have with us Zach Glazar, author of Whisper and Venom. Hey Zach, how are you doing?
Well, pretty well. Thank you very much.
Well, good! Without giving too much away, of course, because you gotta keep a little bit of mystery. What can you tell us about Whisper and Venom?
Well, I can tell you, like you said, I wrote it a long time ago, but I'm very proud of it. When I wrote it, I had no idea I would be doing this. I certainly didn't think I'd be doing this 10 years later, being interviewed about it from a company that I'm part owner of. But I wrote it in a time in my life, actually, when I was sick for a bit. And when I was like kind of not doing much, I thought, well, what do I want? What have I always wanted to do? And when I was very young, something called Dragon Magazine, which predates you guys by a long time. Dragon Magazine had a call for authors for adventures. And when I was young, I thought that would be so cool. When I was I was way too young to actually do it, but I always thought that was something on my bucket list. And so I had a couple drafts in my life I'd written. And one day I had an idea and I wanted to write, just wanted to do it as a bucket list thing. And I wanted to make a module like I used to buy from TSR, removable covers. And thought, well, that'd be really neat. And then I wrote it in a longhand notebook, and it grew basically. And we could talk about all that stuff later a little bit. But
Yeah.
what is it about? It is a fairly open-ended adventure in a place that's a subject to a lot of change. It's a isolated like valley in a little micro region. You can really put it anywhere because it's not real. The regional part's not real big, but it's about ordinary people facing some pretty bad things, and they don't realize how bad it is, because I think oftentimes in reality, you'll see evil things or bad things. You'll deny them, and then you'll just assume they're not so bad, and they cascade. And this is about a cascading evil that goes across a valley that player characters are thrust into, and try to make it like a living place where you don't have to go at it in order. It was designed to be an exploration, and then it has a progression, but the progression is not super logical, and it's kind of a little bit of investigation. And I tried it the best I could. It comes with the mini setting, like I said, and it is designed to be as believable as possible in a place where you can find elves, right?
Yeah.
And fairies and everything else. But it's designed to be, there's got an economy that makes sense to me for a small area. The villagers and the NPCs have interactions that don't matter much to the PCs, but are given to the GM to give them a sense of depth. I thought a lot about the naming of places, because one of the things I hate the most is I absolutely despise names you can't pronounce for no good reason. And Whisper from Whisper and Venom is the name of the main town, which is not very big, but there are like 3 main towns, and Whisper that's where that comes from.
Oh, okay. Whisper and Venom came from a very personal time in your life. How did you go about making it authentic to that, but still being a fantasy game?
I think that any author, and this sounds pretentious, but no author can be authentic about something they really don't have at least adjacent experience to. And what the experience here is the falsity of normality or normalcy. That's how authors talk. No, it's about how the things in the fabric of normal are so vulnerable to things that they don't expect. And in Whisper and Venom, and to some extent, and I'll talk about the second one in a little bit, but it's about, you overestimate the evil of your neighbors and underestimate the evil of what you don't know. And so there are a lot of feuds, and there are a lot of like problems that they're touched on a little bit, and they're trying to humorous, and they try to keep it light. But there's a lot of mistrust, and the mistrust manifests itself as we hate each other. We husbands and wives have frictions, and there's frictions between the little towns, and lots of things going on. But that isn't what the problem is. The problem is it's actually chaos coming from elsewhere that has a ripple effect. And you can see the effects as you go further along. The effects become more obvious, and they manifest themselves in much more horrifying ways. But the effects you see on the town in the beginning, and the setup is they're missing livestock, and they blame each other because it's obviously their neighbor. Because who else would steal livestock? Or it's obviously those jerks in the other town. or it's obviously drunkards. The friction in the town, I try to make obvious because I think that is so parallel just to communities we have everywhere. But it wasn't written to be relatable on you know, on any kind of allegory at all. It was written because I wanted to make an interesting place that seemed, it seemed grounded. And so to make it that way, I had to do things that I think that weren't done often enough in adventure setups, which was economics and how economics can affect emotional things, the kind of things you overlook in your trading neighbors because you really do care about, very high proof spirits. There's a whole city or town of dwarves. It's called Cleftons, and they were renowned and famous for making weapons and making, wonderful pieces of armor. But that was generations before. And so they have all this leftover stuff. So they're coasting. They actually make a machine that makes them sound busy, right? And the point of it is to be humorous, like, oh, you walk in, the machine does all the work, like, if the machine stops working, then nobody believes anything. But it's basically about legacy and not respecting it. And so you have a town of people that engage in trade with a slowly declining resource area. So that isn't sustainable. And there's another town that's very similar to Whisper, but it has like civilized like goblins, but they get along and they trade. But what do they make? They make spirituous liquors. They use fairies and pixies that actually gather ingredients, reagents to make this liquor more addictive and a little bit hallucinogenic, but it makes it more of a desirable product, right? Which causes friction because there's no good that comes of something like that for such a small town, right? But they have this little trade triangle, right? Well, that it's not microeconomics, but it's a very small macro type scale involving what an isolated value would be like. So one makes grain, one makes ale, one makes weapons, and one makes spirituous liquors. So, but they trade like in a triangle. And there's a little scene where there's a temperance union that tries to stop all the hard drinking of these liquors, but the wagon they take to go around and spread their messages also doubles as a bootlegging wagon, right? So you can't escape the vice involved with it. So I think it makes it grounded in ways that we've been fighting this stuff since before the Roman Empire, right? And so it just tries to make it feel real in a not necessarily a fun way, but a relatable one.
Yeah. How do your other adventures reflect real-world economics and political concerns?
The second one I wrote, Death and Taxes, is actually about anarchy and about when you have a vacuum left in power. You have other towns just south of this area that they got abandoned. The setup I used was a plague and it was before 2020, so this isn't modern. This isn't based on anything I knew at the time, but like a plague where it's depopulated after the Black Death to the point where there's no overruling authority. Everything's kind of like a city-state, but in village form. When suddenly authority comes to reassert itself, and it didn't come in an army, right? It comes as a tax man, because what do they really care about? Taxes. So the reestablishment of authority by the sending of an ambassador who actually turns out to be a tax person, it causes dissension. Another evil thing that's related to Whisper and Venom, but it tries to set up a society that you can, in a way, see how it's relatable. And that's where I got that one from. And then the other one, Bird of a Feather, is a little more social, and that's we'll talk about that. That's going to be part of the Whisper and Venom. But those are the three main ones that I wrote.
That's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. What is something that you are extremely proud of when it comes to Whisper and Venom?
Well, I'm proud of the fact that I finished it, because up to that point in my life, I wanted to do a lot of things, but because I had regular jobs and other things in college, and I never got to do a project from creative endeavor from beginning to end. And Whisper and Venom, I did, and I thank you, Kickstarter, for making it possible, because Whisper and Venom started out life as a box set, right? So I made Whisper and Venom, and thank you to Kickstarter, I was able to get the funding to produce boxes. And then, like, for an example, these are for the new Kickstarter, but these are miniatures. They're all miniatures I produced for Whisper and Venom and for Death and Taxes.
Oh, that's so cool.
And these are all samples, right? I don't know if I get close. All right, there we are. So these are little bugs, like they call monster beetles, but they're.
Oh, wow.
So I was able to take what I thought was a really interesting manuscript and then turn it into the product I always wanted to make. And what product I want to make? I live in a small town, and I was a big fan of Dungeons & Dragons. But guess what you couldn't do in the 80s in a small town? You could buy anything from Dungeons & Dragons, nothing at all. You could buy one or two. They always had one or two books in some little local bookstore. But, I had $4 to my name because, I was 9 or 10. And I always thought if you bought an adventure part, having all the miniatures and having all the little accessories was like a dream kind of in a way as a kid. So when I made it, and because Kickstarter happened, I was able to make poster maps and monster cards, and I added dice, and I added miniatures, and I added character sheets and all kinds of stuff. I even had a vellum cover slip, but it's like it looks like a wedding invitation, and it basically says "Welcome to Whisper." And I wanted to make it fancy. I wanted to make it something you'd want to play, because I realized that as adults we were still playing D&D, but we had a little more money. And I think that although I wrote it in a style of very old rules, I think that it's very much a more modern type adventure. So when I wrote it and produced it, I was surprised, really surprised, that I was nominated for an Emmy Awards. I was
Oh,
nominated
wow.
for, so nominated for two. I got one for best production values and one for best miniatures product, which was amusing because I never produced a miniatures product, and this is my first one I had done, so I was lucky. And I worked real hard, but I was lucky. I got defeated by Paizo Pathfinder product, and I also got defeated
Ah.
by a company called Faza. So this wasn't really a defeat, though. I got robbed. No,
Yeah.
no. Honestly, I was able to be for recognition for me with these larger companies who've been doing it for a long time. It felt really good, and I thought that it was something from the Ennies judges to take a brand new company and recognize what they thought was a good product. And so it was nominated for the Three Castles Award at North Texas. My second one was the same way. So I feel really, it felt good to have something recognized by people who would see hundreds and hundreds of products. So I'm proud of the fact that it went that far. Did I think it would lead to a job at Frog God hurting much? No, I didn't. That was never the plan. I mean, I had a little company and it was making a little bit of money, and I was making things, but I'm extraordinarily lucky in the fact that I get to do this now full time. And I spend my days worried about elf books. And I say that, but they're entertaining books that I hope give joy to lots of people. And I'm really lucky. But it's all thanks to the fact that Kickstarter and Whisper and Venom were written, and the timing was good, and I think they're good products. So
You mentioned starting, or that you're very glad to be working at Frog God, which me too, gotta say. Um, we actually have already been told the story sneakily behind your back. Would you like to tell us how exactly the conversation with Bill went about getting you to work?
I met him at a convention at midnight, and he actually backed Whisper and Venom, and then he received it, liked it. And he also, my second one I did was Bird of a Feather was called, and it was a module only. It was an extension in the little world, and he actually played that for his kids and really liked it and thought it was clean. What he said was it was cleanly written. And the thing, my secret weapon there was Edwin Nagy, who now still works with the Frog God because of my work with him before. And Edwin is a thorough and smart and very careful reader of things. So he went through and he read through it, and he made sure that the parts of it that were game related were very thorough. And so Bill liked it when he played with his kids, and that was kind of a compliment. So there I was, not much long after that, about a year, and I'm sitting in Madison, Wisconsin at Game Hole at the lobby of the Clarion. And I had worked 3 days straight. I ran my own booth. I was there with Michael Badalotta from North Texas, and he had half the booth with his stuff for sale and half with me. But I woke up in the morning at 7, and I worked until 6 at night. And then I wasn't in any games, but I was constantly doing a booth. And as one guy, that is a lot of work.
Hmm.
So Saturday night at the Clarion, I finally decided that night, like, well, I'm here to I'm going to go out and meet people, because you just can't stay here. And I remember that day looking down the aisle at Frog God's booth and seeing it mobbed with people. I mean, just mobbed. I'm like, what on earth are they selling? Crack? And we aren't. I want to make that very clear. We're not selling crack. And I have some of their books, and I really admired them. I admired Chuck Wright's layout very much. And I talked to him a little bit, and I admired Skeeter Green for being Skeeter Green. And I knew Matt Finch, and I liked to work with the OSR stuff and Star Wars Wizardry, and I knew who Bill was from, the other Kickstarter stuff. And so I admired those guys, and I was happy to meet them. And I thought, it's kind of cool to be able to meet industry people at the time, because I wasn't industry. I was me with this hat and a few little gnome miniatures. But that night at midnight, he goes, "I'm going to buy your company." And to which, I mean, my response, which was probably not a good negotiating response, was, "It's not worth anything." what are you going to buy? And he was very clear. Eventually, well, I'm really buying you. I'm like, well, I'm for sale. That's easy. Like, no problem. I could prostitute myself to anybody for money, right? But no, it wasn't about that. Honestly, what he was doing. He was looking to expand Frog God. This is my perspective. I can't wait to tell me what you were told. Um, but he was looking to expand Frog God with somebody who could make a box set. One and two, I think, had a skill set that fit. And one of the things that I have an unusual skill set for that most people come into gaming with, but my background's in business management and supply chain management. And so though I worked in government, which explains the death and taxes, I guess, but it's a, I was very familiar with and able to do things like source materials and write, proposals and read a spreadsheet. And that's not super common because creative writing takes a different skill set that is extraordinarily hard to do. And the guys who we hire to do it, guys who work for us that do it, like Ken Spencer or Levi Combs or Case Gustafson, these people can write this stuff fast. I'm a slow writer. I can do it. But, doing a lot of things, being able to do something doesn't mean you can do it professionally. So I had a skill set that most of the people who come into the industry are very successful didn't have because they were so good at stuff I couldn't do, right? I can't draw either. I can't sculpt miniatures. But what I did have was the ability to work with money in a way that actually could produce good stuff and it could work with people. And I would love to still write more things, but if I don't have the time, if I still want to, stay married, for example, which I really like being, and she works at Frog God with us now, and she's a force of nature. So you just think, I'm not going to ignore her so I can write more words. It becomes down to just this is what I'm good at. So he hired me for that purpose, I think. And I'm not sure he knew that's where I'd wind up, but I think that's what he was looking for. Whether he probably told you that he had some deep vision about it. I think he just was tired. I think he really, I know I do. I think honestly, I don't mean this to be mean. I think they all were tired. They all were busy. It's a lot more work than people expect for not a lot of money sometimes. Oh, don't believe her. Whatever you do, don't believe her because whatever she says, it's going to be only partially true. You can't trust the Bene Gesserit in anything.
Well, okay, then I have to clarify one thing. Can you really speak Elvish?
Uh, Enough. Actually, when I was young, I'm not going to say any now because I can't pronounce it. I could be able to write it, but honestly, when I was young, I thought that I bought a book by Ruth. Now I don't remember her name. I still have it. The Languages of Middle Earth, and it had how you do basic Quenya and Tengwar scripting for Sindarin, Bloods of the Language. And so I had that book, and I had the Middle Earth role playing by Iron Crown Enterprises, and then their adventure book, which I still have on my shelf over there, had the actual language with the pronunciations. And so I was a good student, but I was bored all the time. So that's what I did with my free time. And that got all the girls, as you can imagine.
What can you tell us about this Kickstarter?
Well, first of all, we're excited about it. And the Whisper and Venom Kickstarter brings it to two new systems. It's going to bring it to fifth edition primarily, and it's been extensively relooked at for fifth edition. It was originally written in Labyrinth Lord, which is so similar to Swords and Wizardry that it would be easy to release it there, but we're actually releasing it also in Old School Essentials. And so it's going to be both 5e and Old School Essentials. And there's an existing Pathfinder version for it. So that will probably be available, if not during the Kickstarter, after. One of the things we are bringing back to it with the poster map will be in the book by Alyssa Faden, which is how I met her. And she's done so much great work for us. She's the queen of RPG mapping. Her and Anna Meyer could duke it out for the two queens, I guess. But she's awesome. And I have that map canvas on my wall. I was real proud of it. And that will be in the book. And the other thing the Kickstarter has that it hadn't had in the past is, I showed these earlier, but figurines. We're going to have early signups, I think, are going to have a figurine option. And there's also on the top level with the leather books or the collector's books, there'll be a number of figurines involved there, and we never do those at Frog God, and we're going to ship them separately. But because they were so intrinsic to the original product, we're going to go ahead and do that again. So that's a little bit different. I think that also stretch goals. One of the stretch goals is going to be to include the adventure that I wrote, Bird of a Feather, inside the book itself, and potentially the other one, which is you see it, the First Sentinel.
Oh yeah.
I produced that one. It was written by this guy named Edwin Nagy. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Yeah.
Edwin wrote that one for me when I was doing Lesser Gnome, and I produced it with him, and we went over it, and it's a very good book. So those two were separate adventures that we had done, and we're going to put them in the Whisper and Venom book, with enough support. So it's looks wonderful. The art is amazing. I mean, Casey Christopherson and the artist that he picked, I think he's got just amazing. Thon did the cover, but there's all through the book is just amazing stuff. Lloyd Metcalf did a lot of the original art, and some of it will show up in the book itself. Without Lloyd, none of this would be possible. So I'm so grateful for him. And many of his pieces are actually, they're based on the pieces he had done. And if he wasn't so busy, we would have asked him to do more this time. But he became big and important since I did this. So we went with the artists that we use now that are also, big and important, but Casey is in touch with them all the time. And so they've been doing this for a while. We got new maps by Robert Ottbauer for like the VTT sections that we're making, all the components for like basically a do-it-yourself VTT. We won't have a Fantasy Grounds one written in time for it to be done, but eventually we'll wind up on Fantasy Grounds as well. So no, there's no box set, unfortunately, but that has to do with logistics in China more than anything else. And so it'll be a hardcover book in one of two systems. It'll have a poster map, and there will be miniatures, both as an early reward enticement or as a collector's edition. So very excited, actually very excited about that. I think people will be pleased. It really does work well in 5th edition. It really was written in a way that it was not so deadly that it had all the tropes of the 1st edition where, you could die in a second. There were 2 places in the book where they had a save versus death, which we just totally took out because it doesn't represent modern playstyles. Whereas I want this to be played by people because I think it's fun. I think it's interesting. I think it's rewarding in terms of how much more there is to it in depth than some of the things I had seen, especially during the 2E era or 3E, the D20 era. I think that this is my reaction to that, to try to make something that I think was interesting. And so I hope that people come see the Kickstarter, and they hope they come by and join our Discord and comment on the YouTube videos. I will certainly answer any questions. I know more about this book than I know about just about anything. Like I said, I'm real proud of it. And I'm looking forward to seeing the final. I'm as excited about the final version of this I was before, except this time it's so weird I'm managing this project, but so little of it is done by me. Before, I had to learn layout in 2 months to get it done on time. And so I got InDesign, and I'm like, I'm ready to start now, because I did PageMaker 1.0 in high school. And so while I can do this stuff, well, that wasn't exactly true. It turned out it was true. But so this time, though, I have professional layout people doing this, and I have professional people doing the art, people who this is what they do for a living. And I have professional people helping me do the editing, and I have professional people. I mean, it's really a different experience, but fundamentally it's the same book. And so I'm excited about that. And I think people would enjoy it very much. I sure hope they do.
Yeah, I'm sure they will, because when you spend that amount of time working on something, it shows, it comes through. And so I know I'm excited about it. So
no, I'm excited about it too, and I'm excited about the characters in it. The NPCs I think are interesting. So we're going to add a couple of new things to it. There's going to be a new, not adventure location, but a place inside of the setting, and it's like a landing and it's kind of a start point to go travel the rivers to see more around if you want to explore it further. There's going to be some new NPCs, some NPCs that come from a couple of our other books that I wrote in there, and so there's going to be expanded some. It's certainly it'll include the other adventures that I haven't seen the light of day in forever. It'll have it's a 5e component, and like I said, it's the first one that we're doing in Old School Essentials, which is currently very popular for old school material. We really like it. Gavin from Necrotic Gnome, which I think is a great name, is the guy behind that, and he's introduced us to some quality people who are helping to make sure that it fits that play style exactly, though I suspect it's very easily slipped in. I don't know for sure. We want to make sure that our first release of that is really good. So lots of interesting stuff. Like I said, it's weird to be doing this part of it again at all, because I spend almost all my time, like, you're interviewing me is unusual because you interview everybody else who doesn't do more direct work than I am. But it's fun to do. It's important to do for me to just do this all again, because I want to, but also because it reminds me how hard my people work. I forget sometimes exactly how hard it is to do all the component parts. I just point like, hey, you do this, and Hey, Chuck, you did. Ken, God dang it. And Edwin, what's your problem? I'm a I'm the guy who everything comes to when there's a problem. I have to go out and fix it, right? Now I understand their problems again much better, and I think it's good for our company in general that we do that. And I think that this is a great product for me to do that on, and I think it's a great product. And everybody who's involved with it has liked it, so I'm really rooting for this Kickstarter to do well because if it does, we can do Death and Taxes.
Yeah. Which we do have plans to interview some of the other people on various, even if it's not necessarily about a specific project, but just to kind of, get to know the team a little bit, get to know what it is that they do, that sort of thing. So that'll definitely
Well, I'll
be in
make them do it
works.
so they can't say no.
Yeah,
Just
there
let
you
me know.
go.
One of the joys of being like a minor boss in a small company is I can bully them into doing your bidding. I will.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today about Whisper and Venom and the new Kickstarter. I'm serious. Like I'm intrigued about this. This sounds very interesting, and I know I'm looking forward to it. I know you're looking forward to it, and hopefully everyone out there is looking forward to it. So if you guys out there who are listening would like to check it out, the link will be in the description, and at the time of this posting, the Kickstarter will be live.
Thank you all very much.